I still remember the day I left for Okinawa. The sun was barely up, casting that soft golden light across the porch, where I'd spent countless summer evenings. With my mom, watching fireflies dance in the yard. I stood there with my duffel bag slung over one shoulder, taking in every detail. The chipped paint on the shutters that Dad always promised to fix. The creaky third step that announced visitors before they could knock. The ancient oak tree where my brother and I had carved our initials when we were kids. I didn't know then that it would be the last time I'd stand there as the owner of that house. I didn't know that the two people I trusted most in the world were about to betray me in a way I never thought possible. The deployment was supposed to be 18 months. 18 months of serving my country, doing the work I'd trained for, living the life I'd chosen when I enlisted at 22. Before I left, I'd made what I thought were careful arrangements. My dad had power of attorney, just in case, something happened and bills needed to be paid or paperwork needed signing. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. He was my father. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike. Who'd come to every single one of my high school baseball games. Who'd shaken my hand with tears in his eyes the day I came home in uniform for the first time. Why wouldn't I trust him? And my brother, Marcus, God, where do I even start with Marcus? Growing up, we were inseparable. He was 2 years younger, and I was the classic protective older brother. Always looking out for him. Always making sure he was okay. But somewhere along the way, Marcus lost his footing. It started small, skipping classes, hanging out with the wrong crowd, borrowing money he never quite managed to pay back. By the time I left for Okinawa, he was 31 years old and hadn't held a steady job in 5 years. Dad called him, between opportunities. Mom, before she passed, called it like she saw it. Marcus was a deadbeat, and we were enabling him. But he was still my brother. And when he called me 2 months into my deployment, voice rough and desperate, telling me he was about to be evicted and just needed a place to crash for a few weeks, what was I supposed to say? The house was sitting empty anyway. I'd paid off the mortgage 2 years earlier. One of the proudest moments of my life. Handing over that final payment on the house Mom had loved so much. She'd passed away from cancer 3 years before I deployed. And that house was all I had left of her. Every room held her memory. The kitchen where she'd taught me to make her famous lasagna. The living room where we'd all watched movies together on Friday nights. The garden she'd tended with such care, growing tomatoes and roses. And herbs that made the whole yard smell like heaven in the summer. Just keep an eye on the place, I told Marcus over a scratchy video call, the connection dropping every few seconds. Keep it clean, don't trash it, and for God's sake, pay the utilities. I've got them on auto pay, but just make sure nothing weird happens. He promised he would. He swore up and down that he was getting his life together. That this was the fresh start he needed. I wanted so badly to believe him. The first few months in Okinawa were intense, long days, challenging work. The kind of exhaustion that makes you fall into bed without even remembering to take your boots off. I called home when I could. Usually reaching Dad since Marcus was notoriously bad at answering his phone. Dad always said the same things. Everything's fine, house is good. Marcus is actually doing better. Don't worry about anything back home, just focus on staying safe. I'd lie in my bunk afterward, staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar ache of homesickness but also pride. Pride in serving, pride in having that house waiting for me. Pride in helping my brother get back on his feet. It was month 7 when I started noticing something was off. Marcus had gone completely silent, not unusual for him, but this felt different. When I finally got Dad on the phone, he was evasive. Short answers. Changing the subject. Everything's handled, he kept saying. Don't worry about it. You've got enough on your plate. There was something in his voice, though, something that made my stomach drop. A guilty edge I couldn't quite name but definitely felt. Dad, what's going on? I pressed him, stepping outside the rec room to hear better over the noise. Is something wrong with the house? There was this long pause, so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he sighed, and I heard years of weariness in that sound. We had to make some decisions, son. Marcus was in a bad spot, and the house was just sitting there. And there were some opportunities. My blood went cold. What kind of opportunities? I demanded. What decisions? That's when he told me. Told me like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Like he was explaining why he'd chosen one brand of coffee over another at the grocery store. He and Marcus had sold my house. My house. The house I'd worked 2 jobs to buy when I was 25. The house I'd poured my savings into. The house where my mother had lived her last good days before the cancer took her. They'd sold it 6 weeks earlier to some investment company for cash. We got a good price, Dad said, like that made it okay. And Marcus really needed the money. He was in deep with some people, son. Bad people. This solved a lot of problems. I couldn't breathe. I remember clutching the phone so hard my hand cramped. Standing in the humid Okinawa night with sweat running down my back and my entire world crumbling. That wasn't your house to sell, I said. And my voice sounded strange even to my own ears, too calm, too quiet. I didn't authorize that. You had power of attorney for emergencies? For paying bills if something happened to me. Not to sell my fucking house. Dad got defensive then. Said I didn't understand the situation. That I was half a world away and didn't know how bad things had gotten. That Marcus would have been killed if they hadn't come up with money fast. That as my father he'd made the hard choice I couldn't make. The next hours were a blur of frantic calls. I tried reaching Marcus straight to voicemail, over and over. I called the county recorder's office and confirmed it. The deed had been transferred. My name was gone. Some LLC I'd never heard of now owned my mother's house. I called a lawyer back in the States. Explained the situation with shaking hands. Typing out emails at 3 a.m. Okinawa time. This is fraud, she told me. Elder abuse of power of attorney. We can fight this. But her voice had that careful, measured tone lawyers use when they're preparing you for disappointment. The question is, can we prove your father acted without your consent? And can we prove it before the new owners establish legal protections? I learned later, piecing together the story from phone records and bank statements and testimony from people who'd rather have stayed silent. What really happened? Marcus had gotten himself into debt, gambling, mostly, with a side of bad investments and worse decisions. He owed money to people who don't take "I'll pay you back eventually" as an answer. He went to Dad, spinning some story about being in danger, about needing money immediately or facing consequences. I don't even want to imagine. And Dad, who'd been enabling Marcus his whole adult life, who'd always believed the best about his youngest son even when the evidence screamed otherwise, decided to help. But here's the thing that really broke me. They didn't sell the house to pay off Marcus's debts. They sold it, and Marcus took his half, roughly $85,000 after closing costs, and disappeared. Just vanished. Changed his number, moved out of state, cut off all contact. Dad took his half and paid off some of his own debts I didn't even know he had. My house, my mother's house, the place that held every good memory of my childhood and every dream I had for my future, got liquidated so my deadbeat brother could run away from his problems and my father could clear his conscience about his own financial mistakes. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I couldn't process it at first. I'd go through my days in Okinawa on autopilot, wake up, work, eat, sleep, and then lie awake at night trying to understand how this had happened. How the two people who were supposed to have my back, who were supposed to protect what was mine while I was serving my country, could have done this to me. I kept replaying moments from my childhood, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Dad always been capable of this? Had Marcus always been this selfish? Or had I just been too trusting, too naive, too willing to see the best in people who didn't deserve it? But that house, God, that house was so much more than just property. It was the first place I'd ever felt truly independent, signing those mortgage papers with cramping hands and a heart full of pride. It was where I'd brought my mother after her diagnosis, converting the downstairs guest room into a bedroom, so she wouldn't have to climb stairs, sitting with her through chemo fog, and bad days and the few good days where she'd smile and remind me she'd always known I'd make something of myself. It was where I'd planned to build my future, maybe get married someday, raise kids, give them the same kind of safe, loving childhood I'd had before everything fell apart. The legal battle took 8 months. 8 months of depositions and paperwork and phone calls with lawyers while I was still stationed overseas, still doing my job, still trying to hold it together. The investment company that bought the house fought hard. They'd paid fair market value, they claimed, and had no reason to know the sale was fraudulent. Dad hired his own lawyer and claimed he'd acted in my best interest, that I'd given verbal permission over the phone. Marcus couldn't be found to give testimony. It was my word against my father's, and I was thousands of miles away, unable even to come home and fight in person. In the end, we settled. The house was gone, the investment company kept it, though they had to pay additional damages. I got some money back, enough to sting but nowhere near enough to replace what I'd lost. Dad had to repay a portion of the proceeds, though he'd already spent most of it. Marcus was never found, never held accountable, probably living somewhere under a new name, with my money in his pocket and no conscience to keep him up at night. The worst part? That house was never just about the money or the property value. It was my last physical connection to my mother, to the life we'd built together, to the dreams she'd had for me. It was the place where I was supposed to come home after my service and start the next chapter of my life. Instead, I came home to nothing. No house, no brother, and a father I could barely stand to look at without feeling sick with betrayal and loss and a rage so deep I still don't know what to do with it. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals cut too deep to ever forgive. That's what I learned in Okinawa, serving my country while my family destroyed my life back home. And sometimes, the people who hurt you most are the ones who were supposed to love you best. Now I rent a small apartment, rebuilding from scratch what took me years to create. I haven't spoken to Dad in over a year, and Marcus remains a ghost. The money's gone, the house is gone, and the family I thought I had was apparently gone long before I ever left for Okinawa. Some betrayals don't just break trust, they shatter your entire understanding of who people really are. That house was my mother's legacy, my future, my home. And they sold it like it meant nothing at all.